Hello, everybody. My name is Ken Jacobson. I'm one of the programmers here at the Palm Springs International Film Festival. And over the 26 years of this festival, it's a pretty rare event for us to decide, you know, we need another award. But this year, something remarkable happened. And what that is, could be summarized in 2 words: Laura Poitras. What she's done in bringing to light what you've seen here tonight is truly remarkable. And we collectively, as the Palm Springs Film Festival, decided that we really should recognize what she's accomplished this year. So we created this award. So let me just say that, what is this award? It was created by the festival in recognition of the significant role that filmmakers play in exposing and bringing awareness to issues of vital importance to society, and to honor filmmakers whose work, both on screen and off, leads to a positive change in people's attitudes towards key aspects of our world. And so it is with great honor and privilege that, on behalf of the Palm Springs International Film Festival, I present the first ever Filmmakers Who Make a Difference Award to the remarkable Laura Poitras. So Laura is now going to be in conversation about her incredible journey and about this film with the editor-in-chief and general manager of IndieWire, Dana Harris. Dana?
So the first time I saw this film was at its premiere in New York at the New York Film Festival. And that was one of the most extraordinary premieres I've ever attended, because there was a real-life impact going on between what we were seeing and what we were suddenly recognizing, the power of what we were seeing, that we all of a sudden realized that at this point we are more than likely all under surveillance. I can't believe that the NSA didn't have somebody in the audience that night. You laugh, but it really was like that was a kind of cognizance. Talk to me a little bit about what that journey's been like for you, because for you, like, this was a huge secret for so long that and then it takes on a life of its own, first in New York, and now it's 3 months later. What has that journey been like for you?
First, before I want to answer that, I want to thank the festival for this really incredible honor. It's really a privilege to receive it, and particularly because I received it on behalf of the many extraordinary people who I made this film with, the people who took extraordinary risks. So it's really wonderful, and I want to thank the festival. Making this film was unlike any other film experience I've had, partly because of the fact that we were in the position of making a film at the same time as news was unfolding. And so we were editing and things were happening and we were continuing to film. And this really went up until the very, very last minute in the editing room, where we were learning things, and there was journalism that was happening that was coordinated, or that was coinciding with the finishing of the film. And so there were questions about what we could include in the film, what we couldn't, because what we were ready to publish and what we weren't. And so that was kind of unlike anything I've ever gone through, and also the extraordinary editor that I worked with, Mathilde Bonnefoy. so we had to sort of just, always have sort of two heads about what was happening. And then the film was made under such extraordinary secrecy in terms of who actually knew about the film and the contents of it. And particularly because of some, source protection reasons, we were very, very careful in terms of what we sent and what we shared with who. And when we were in the process of editing, the people we were working with, both as funders and as distributors, we asked them to come to Berlin. We didn't send footage to the United States. We put them in screening rooms. We took away cell phones, and then we did screenings. And we asked everyone not to talk about the content of the film until we were ready to release it. And then when we were at the stage where we wanted to share it with film festivals, when we thought we knew when it was ready, we made a trip to New York and we had encrypted versions of the film. And the premiere, which was at the New York Film Festival, we invited the curators to see it at a screening location. And again, we took away their cell phones and we screened it there. And then and up until the very end, we had redacted parts of the film. So what you see in the last scene, there were black boxes over that. And so our distributors and the festival actually didn't know all the sort of details that you see in the finished film, and there's still some redactions in it. So all those kinds of things were, to balance those things were, added a layer of complexity to the film. And then when we released it, or when we premiered it at New York, it was the first time I actually felt that almost I saw the film, because as a filmmaker, I believe in that cinema is a public experience. I mean, that for me the film is complete when it's seen by people in a theater. And we had done screenings, but they were relatively small because we were trying to keep the circle tight. And so I actually felt like I saw it for the first time at New York, which was
what did that reveal to you? And actually, what has been revealed to you in the process of screening it? I'm sure you know dozens of times in the last 3 months.
I mean, a number of things. I think one of the biggest surprises was we knew that there was humor in the film, but it actually once there was an audience and people saw what was going on between Snowden and Glenn, and then the humor kind of came to the foreground in a way that it doesn't when you're doing smaller screenings, and that was one of the big sort of learning experiences that we had when we premiered it.
And in terms of it's like what effect was there after have you been contacted by the government? It's like what kind of reaction has there been? Is it radio silence? What's that been like?
So it's been radio silence, but of course that's has been a concern throughout working on this reporting, was whether or not the government would do anything to try to either stop the reporting or to stop the film. But there's been no effort to contact me directly regarding the film or any of the reporting. So after I returned, I've been based in Berlin doing the reporting. So after Glenn and I were in Hong Kong, I went back to Berlin, and there wasn't any, we know that there were meetings in the government about what to do about the reporting, and obviously you see that David Miranda was detained in the UK, so there was certainly, the government was trying to figure out if there was a way to contain the journalism that we were doing, but I was never contacted.
How did you feel about this in terms of it being a piece of reportage versus, in a film? Because it's very clearly this is a very composed film work. At the same time, you have this responsibility. The journalist, the whole reason for making the film is because of the information you're trying to build. How did you try to balance those two out?
Yeah, I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, I mean, I think I consider that the work that we do is journalism, but it's journalism and filmmaking, and I always consider myself really that if I make a film, what I wanted to do is work as a film, not just as journalism. I mean, the films don't exist to break news. I mean, there are other venues to do that. which isn't to say that you don't have to go through all the sort of journalistic process in terms of fact checking and making sure that the information in the film is accurate. But I've been making cinema verite films, and cinema verite, for those who don't know it, is a tradition of filmmaking where you film events as they're unfolding in real time, and it's sort of begun by D.A. Pennebaker and Albert Maysles, and then you craft a story. And when you're in the process of making the film, there's as much uncertainty that you experience as a filmmaker as the people you're filming, because you actually don't know what's going to happen next. And I love that kind of filmmaking, because it's a window into humanity that I think is really rare. And so I think in this case it was a pretty extraordinary circumstance to sort of be in a hotel room as this journalistic encounter.
Snowden even says that. He says it's such a strange feeling. You not to know what's going to happen the next hour, the next day, but it's also kind of liberating.
Yeah. Right. And I very much felt that. So it was, there was a sense of drama and tension that I brought into all of the reporting that hopefully finds its way into the film, because it's very present when I was making it. And I think that that this it actually is also a piece of journalism. I mean, it's a document about a journalistic encounter that happened in this hotel room. So, but it's also very much crafted. I mean, I'm interested in cinema. I mean, I consider myself a filmmaker first. But there is this constant balance. But I'm very interested in how, with cinema verite filmmaking, you can both craft narratives, but also document history as it unfolds. And so I made a film about the Iraq War, and it's very much about what was the occupation like in 2004, 2005. So it's a document. I mean, it's history, but it's also crafted as a narrative.
Well, it's a really interesting contrast in terms of the contrast to the way that certainly any big budget film or effects-driven film is like they're storyboarded within an inch of their lives. And this is the antithesis of that. I mean, it's like, do you have any greater comfort now that you've done enough cinema verite where you trust, like, okay, the story will be there, or is it a question of like, holy crap, and now what?
There's a lot of that and uncertainty, that you just don't know where it's going. And but I also have been doing it a while. It becomes a space that I'm relatively familiar with. Like, don't know where this is going, but I'm along for the ride. And in this case, it was pretty clear that once, there was a lot of uncertainty when I was receiving the emails. Who knows if this person was really going to come forward, and if they would meet, and if there would actually be documents. But once I was in the hotel room, I definitely felt that my sort of experience in the past kind of kicked in, because I was definitely really experienced a lot of nervousness. I really felt like that anything could happen at any moment. And I just kind of had to, lean on the fact that I've been doing this for a while, and that I, will hopefully get the material I need to when I go back and edit the film. And then when I went back to Berlin, I definitely wanted to continue to film the reverberations. I mean, the way that we thought about the film was this kind of concentric circles, that there was this sort of core event, which was what happened in Hong Kong, and that there were sort of ripple effects that sort of emanate out of it, and that we actually didn't want the film to have what is called like a third act resolution, like that we didn't want it to feel like that there's closure, because we actually think that there isn't closure, and that the impact of what happened there will continue to reverberate into the future. And so we wanted the film to sort of, push out into, not have a feeling of closure at the end.
Did you have a greater sense of, again, based on your experience with prior films, it was like in terms of your own anxiety and paranoia? I mean, I've talked to you before about this in terms of like, you just, at this point, you're used to the fact, okay, they're going to check me at the border, they're going to detain me, this just comes with the territory. Is this, how hyped was that in this process?
I mean, this film, it really went through waves. I mean, there was probably a year of really, really intense anxiety that I felt. I mean, and that began when I started receiving the emails, because it kicked in. Like, if I knew the magnitude of what I was hearing, and that if there were actually documents that were going to substantiate these claims, that really powerful people would be angered. And that the reporting was going to be difficult, and then after Hong Kong, being in Berlin, there were several months where I was pretty worried about what might happen next. And that now it seems a bit more calm, but which isn't to say it's normal, but I think I've both a combination of become used to a certain expectation that, for instance, I don't really trust that my emails are private and those kinds of things. I have to assume that I'm under electronic surveillance. Physical surveillance was probably more likely in the first months after finishing in Hong Kong.
How long did it take you to really trust Snowden in terms of, because in terms of this, at this point he's, relatively speaking, his household name, he was just this encrypted person on your computer, and it's very, to me, one of the bits of comedy comes from, you can just see this look in Glenn's eyes in the hotel room initially. It's like, you're kidding, right? And it's like, and it takes a little while for it to kind of break through. It's like, no, this is really happening. This is really true. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started receiving emails in January 2013, and I was a bit taken aback by them. I was, some of the things went through my head. I said, okay, could this be an entrapment effort? I figured that since I'd been on a watch list and stopped at the border so many times, could there be some sort of entrapment? And it was a little bit mysterious why I was being contacted, because I'm a visual journalist, documentary filmmaker, and this was clearly material for a newsroom and for print reporting. But then it made sense. I mean, the way he answered the questions. I mean, I said, how do I know you're not trying to entrap me? How do I know, why are you contacting me? How do I know you're not crazy? I mean, I just asked him lots of questions, and he was, very forthcoming. And he said, I know that you're working on the reporting on the NSA, because I had published something in the New York Times about it. So he had heard about it that way, and he actually said that because I had been subjected to this watch list process was one of the reasons where he felt that I would understand how to, why these questions mattered. And he also said, I'm never going to ask anything of you, like as in terms of entrapment, to sort of make me feel that wasn't what was happening. But I trusted him pretty early, even though I remained, skeptical or on alert for anything that seemed suspicious. But we definitely built trust. But it wasn't really until right before going to Hong Kong that I knew it was for real. I mean, until you see a document, I didn't know. But he gave such level of specificity that it was, I believed him pretty early on.
Have you ever met, it's like, this is, Snowden, I mean, obviously has done, this extraordinary thing in terms of divorcing himself from his life in the name of, putting out information and, trying to stop a process that, believes is, illegal and unfair and, threatens our basic freedoms. At the same time, he comes across in the film as this very kind of level-headed, normal person. It's like somebody like that you can imagine being much more grandiose, or having a martyr complex or something. I don't get that sense of that from the film at all. Were you surprised by the kind of personality that he presented in terms of like the contrast of this kind of nice, normal guy, and by the way, I have the world secrets in my control?
Glenn and I were completely shocked by who we met, because we actually expected to meet somebody who was going to be, end of career senior, maybe 50s, and we were, so we were taken aback by how young he was, and that took us, we had to sort of rewire our brains, and then we understood, and then it made sense, and the way he describes how he feels about the internet and what the internet meant for him. I think that's kind of the key to understand what he felt was that needed to be known by the public, that that the internet was being used to monitor people, and that it was happening in secret, and that these things shouldn't happen in secret in a democracy. That in a democracy these should be things that are debated and not decided in secret. So, but it was an extraordinary risk that he took, obviously. And he was somebody, I think he paid attention to what had happened in other cases, other whistleblower cases, like William Binney, Thomas Drake. He understood like how the government had responded to people who went through the official channels to try to expose the domestic surveillance that he saw. So in the case of William Binney, you see in the film, and also Thomas Drake, I mean, they all became under investigation. And they did everything by the book. I mean, these were career NSA and government I'm trying to think, servants, right, government servants, and who saw something that they felt was wrong and then became the subjects of investigation. So I think Snowden paid attention to all those things in terms of figuring out how he was going to, come forward.
Yeah, I mean, they're also civil servants, and you can the kind of their disappointment's kind of palpable in terms of what they realize with this thing that is Vinny was saying, it's like he loves solving puzzles, and then suddenly realizes like, oh, this is what it's being led to now. Have you continued to be in touch with Snowden in the last since the release?
I mean, I'm still in touch. I'm still reporting on documents, so I'm in touch with him. Not as regularly recently because I've been traveling a lot, but I'm still in contact, and so is Glenn.
Talk a little bit about the technical demands of the film. I'm presuming you must have had you had 4 people actually shooting the film in terms of in terms of the camera, and I'm presuming must have been a light crew.
Right. I mean, so in Hong Kong it was just me. I was shooting alone. So I did camera and sound, and there was nobody else went with me. I didn't want to. The risks were pretty high, and I actually. Shooting alone is something I like doing and I feel confident doing, but I also loved collaborating, and particularly in certain circumstances. So I've been working with Kirsten Johnson, who's a cinematographer, and she shot some of these really fantastic scenes with Binney, and Trevor Peglin, who's do people know Trevor Peglin's work, the photographer? Does anyone? He's really, I think, one of the most extraordinary photographers working today, and he's been filming black sites and things that are sort of classified, but that you can, if you travel to the middle of the desert, you can find them. And so his photography's been doing that, and I loved his work. And then we felt we really wanted to also have that kind of element in the film. And so what you see at the end of the film, where you have like the cliffs where it says Bude, and then there's a German surveillance site, and then there's another one, I think at Menwith Hill. Those were Trevor's putting on a backpack and climbing over into the woods for hours and taking those photographs. So those were really not easy images to capture. And then I had filmed the beginning, the construction of the Bluffdale site in Utah. I started documenting that in 2011, and I was really interested. I mean, again, that's sort of like cinema verite. Like you can only, that building will only be built once, and so sort of having a documentary record of the construction of that was something I'm just interested in as a documentarian. So there's a combination of collaborative for certain shoots, and then going into the field and oftentimes working alone. And by going alone, it affords me the ability to be patient, which is a really kind of great thing. When you're working with other people, even if they're also patient, you worry about whether or not they've gotten enough sleep, if they're are hungry for lunch, or all those kinds of things that you want to take care of somebody who you've brought into a situation. And so when I'm shooting alone, I don't have to worry about those things, and I kind of like that push-pull. But one of the complicated things was how to secure the footage. When I was shooting in the hotel room, I was making backups. I had encrypted hard drives, and I was backing it up to hard drives onto 2 hard drives, making sure to get one of the hard drives outside of the hotel room in case we were raided. And then I didn't want to, the physical media, which was stored on SD cards, I was destroying those because, again, I didn't want the outtakes. If anything had, people had come into the hotel room, I wanted to keep all the footage on encrypted media. So there were those kinds of things, and then when I left Hong Kong, I left a copy there, and then brought another copy back to Berlin, and made sure to distribute things so that we could,
That sounds like a post-production nightmare. I mean, coordination's hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with really great people. Mathilde and the editing team that we had. They got really good at really long passwords, and it did create challenges. I mean, particularly when we got into like the sound part where we had to widen the circle. Everybody had to get on encryption, and they had to enter all these passwords, and there was a bit of it does add a layer of complexity. But on the other hand, we felt in this case we really wanted to keep the source material protected.
Mantles of power for everybody, right? So, do I have any questions from the audience? Oh, yes. Okay. The woman in the blue. Yes, you.
Have any of the U.S. policies on unauthorized surveillance changed since Edward Snowden blew the whistle?
Yeah, so the question is if policies have changed in the U.S. And since Snowden blew the whistle. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of change. I mean, the one of the most talked about is what Glenn's first story, which is the collection of all of our phone record data that's still being collected, and it's been there have been bills that to try to change it, and there's been review boards that have recommended to dismantle that program, but it's still in effect today.
Is there anything that isn't in the film that you wish you could have put in the film?
Yeah, so the question is there anything that isn't in the film that I wish I could? I mean, there's so much. I mean, but that's just the pain of filmmaking. Like you have to make these really tough choices. And so I had filmed for a long time before being contacted by Snowden, and I have some extraordinary footage that just didn't work in the film that will hopefully find its way into another film. There isn't anything that I withheld. I mean, there was, except for the fact that I would say that I'm still there is still some footage that I feel as a that I'm that I'll release at a later time, because as a journalist I still have some obligations for source protection. But mostly it's just the tough choices you always have to make as a filmmaker, that you have to lose a lot for the good of the whole.
Gentleman back there with glasses.
Yes, hi. At the end of the 8 days, it said that you wanted to stick around China, but that you started to be followed. Who is following you, and what is that like to suddenly discover that you're being followed?
Yeah. So I was being. It's hard to know who. I mean, it was local, but it's hard to know if that's who they were working on behalf of. But there was that, and then there was the media. I was definitely being followed by all the anchors, network anchors, descended onto Hong Kong after. So I was being followed by them too, and I just couldn't work. And I also felt that I was, as much as I would have been interested to continue documenting and filming, that I was adding risk. I mean, that just seemed kind of clear, and that the situation was really tense. So I went back to Berlin, which. Well, the situation was also pretty tense there, but it was a little bit less. So.
Yes, I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit. First of all, fantastic job. Thank you. And I'm wondering if what is Edward Snowden's life like now? How does he support himself? What are his fears? Does he now just like this? Well, does he as a assignment go on for more than 1 year? And does he regret, and does he see himself remaining? Obviously there may be unknowns in this. And also about Glenn. does Glenn, is he at liberty to come back to the U.S. and in the wake of the film has he?
So that was a lot of questions, so I don't know if I'm going to remember them all. Glenn, let me start the easy one. Yeah, Glenn and I both, we stayed away from the U.S. for several months, and we talked to a lot of lawyers, and we decided ultimately that we were going to come back, and we came back together in April 2000 of last year, 2014. So he is traveling back and forth now. In terms of Ed, he currently, so he. He has asylum in Russia, I think for 3 years now, He actually was not intending to go there. He was transiting through to try to go to Latin America, and that his passport was revoked. I know he's submitted applications to many other countries. Sadly, there haven't been that many people who want to come forward. I mean, I think there's a lot of support for him, popular support in Germany, but the government doesn't really, want to take on the U.S. on that. But I wouldn't be surprised in the coming, year, 2 years, something that there might be another option. Another country will come forward. And his day-to-day life, I don't know that much. I mean, he's very much like, he compartments things. He tells people what, like it's a bit of a need to know, like, and I don't know those things about his daily life. And I think he has a fellowship, which to do some research and stuff around, privacy-related technology.
Way back there with the start.
If you compare this situation with Watergate and the Pentagon Papers and Deep Throat, you can look at those 1970s Watergate-related issues and say, well, at least they found a villain, or they villainized or vilified Nixon and forced him out of office, and it was dealt with, and new realities set in place, and hopefully new policies. This is different.
So are you asking, like, basically it's like, where does the road lead?
What do you expect to achieve in this episode to achieve in the years to come?
One of the things that I find quite shocking, and not just about the NSA surveillance and some of what I would believe are violations of the Constitution that have been exposed, but just a lot of the things that have happened in the post 9/11 era is how little accountability there has been. When you compare it to like the Watergate, which right now would be like, that's like petty crime compared to, for instance, things like torture and black sites where there'd been no hearings or accountability or those kinds of things. So there definitely, we're living in different times in terms of government accountability. But in terms of what I intend to, want to achieve, I'm just trying to do my job as a journalist and as a filmmaker, and bring truth forward, and also hold our government accountable for what it does. So hopefully, if enough people engage in those kinds of activities, then hopefully maybe things will change.
So you don't show up in the film much, and that's kind of interesting. I want to ask that for one part. The second part is, did you know about Jabber or Debian or PGP or any of that stuff before you brought it to you? And the third thing is... Yeah. Well, my last one is, what are you doing now?
Okay. So you're in the tech field?
No, actually I'm a journalist. I'm just sort of covering it, but because I have a background in that kind of by accident. I have a kid who's 20, who's like a genius. So I have to kind of keep up with him.
Awesome, okay. So there's a question about, did I know about these sort of encryption tools? And the other question was that I'm not more in the film. So I did know about the encryption tools before he contacted me. He didn't know that, and I think he was pleasantly surprised. He asked for my key, I had a key, and then, we went through, he's like, okay, then I want to talk to you, but not at your true name, and then I created an anonymous account, and then I ended up actually having a computer that I bought with cash, because I really wanted to sever metadata between my, true name, IP address, and what I was communicating. And so I had experience, but I definitely, he asked me to use more means of security. So for instance, we used the Tails operating system.
Do you call it year zero for the download?
I can't say. I'm not gonna. No, actually, that was my local.
Oh,
I was saving to year zero, so that was my local drive.
Interesting. Anonymous was a woman. What is that group?
Oh, it was a funder. It was actually a funder.
Okay,
It's
so
not.
they
It's not
exist.
anonymous. It's a funder. Yeah, but so I was using the Tails operating system, and I created my persistent volume, and I called it year zero. But and as a filmmaker, I'm often shooting, so when I was in the hotel room, I was behind the camera. I wasn't sort of standing behind the camera and somebody else was operating it, but I was actually, you know, that was where I, you know, so I wasn't in front of the camera. I mean, you see.
For your privacy though, so nobody.
No, it's not about that. I mean, I'm really interested in telling, like, filming things and building a kind of narrative unfolding, like and so with that kind of filmmaking, there's a kind of, almost becomes like you can build a scene like a fiction, and if you're in it too much, you sort of break the fourth wall, so to say, and then it becomes maybe more of an essay than it feels like a drama. But it's also, I still think it's very much told from a first person perspective, and that I'm a narrator in the film, right? Like that I'm sort of taking you on the journey. So those were the things. But I think, you know, we did in the editing go back and forth around that question. And when it became too much about me, I felt it became more of an essay, and I really wanted to feel like it had the sort of it had a push, a dramatic push to it. And for me, that happens more with having scenes. And if I'm in the film, then people are like more just thinking about, I don't know. For me, it's just a balance.
And so just to wrap this up, because we don't have time for questions, to address what she asked, what are you doing now? What are scenes, like I know you're continuing to do reporting, this was part of a trilogy after life after 9/11, do you feel like, okay, this part's done and this is moving on to something else, or is it something that's coming out from one of these films?
I mean, I think I'm still gonna, to the extent that, you know, these themes are still, I think, important in the country, I probably won't walk away from them. But I think the next thing I'm going to do is going to be less linear. So I'm going to do something for a museum. So I'll approach maybe similar themes in a different way, in terms of less sort of bound by narrative plot, and be a bit more open, sort of non-linear.
Well, thank you so much for this. It's really
Thank you.